and welcome back to the Little Show. I'm Joanna Turner, Intuitive Business Mentor, and today we are doing a little wrap-up of my weekend's planetary gridwork adventure up to Inverness over the 1111 portal, and the quite wild adventure that unfolded, and concluding with my last day journey home, which was quite a weird, miraculous flow story. So I'm really excited to get into it today. And I have to say that I did have a moment when I was leaving the house. We left pretty early on Sunday the 10th, and I thought, what if absolutely nothing happens? What if nothing happens and I have built this big story up feeling like there's this thing happening, and yeah, maybe I'll feel nothing, maybe I'll get no answers, maybe I'll discover nothing. It's all possible. But the good news is there is a good story, and it all connects, and it was pretty magical. So I'm very happy to share my little planetary gridwork journey from the weekend. And I would love to know if it resonates, if you did anything special for the 1111, and if my journey in any way connects with what you were doing, because I know that what I was up to was only one tiny piece of this much bigger puzzle. And I love that the pieces that had already been dropping in before I even left all weaved in really beautifully with what came through. I'll read you the exact transmission that I got in the Akashic Records. I did some automatic writing when I opened the records before I started the process, so I was able to have a really clear memory of exactly what went on and what happened. So that is great. So if you haven't listened to the previous episode with Hannah, it has also been kind of building up, I suppose, over the different episodes. You will be able to pick up, if you've not listened to any other ones, that's fine. I'll do a quick brief intro on where we were at before it started. But if you go back a few episodes, you'll definitely feel like they're building on each other with the little bits of information that came through. But my lovely friend Yulia Weigart of the Sacred Travel podcast, when we connected, she was on my show talking about some of her gridwork journey, and then I went on and did a 2-part episode on her podcast, the Sacred Travel podcast, and it talks a lot about Scotland, the ley lines, the gridwork, and the fact that the vortexes of Scotland are open from 2023 through to 2026. So it is a potent time to be visiting Scotland, coming to do grid work, exploring that kind of thing. So we're in a really beautiful time, and time happened to be the whole theme. So Yulia is in Geneva, Switzerland, which is the heart of time, and she asked me specifically, she had an intuitive nudge, and she asked me if I could be at Clava Cairns for the 1111. And I said, yes, I will make that happen. And she wasn't going to come. She was going to be in Geneva. And the day before, now I actually haven't listened to her. I've got a 4-minute voice message from her. I haven't listened to it. I've just realized maybe I should listen to it. Maybe I'll pause this and go listen to it and come back. Hang on. Okay, so I just listened to voice message. I'm glad I did. And so I'm not giving you duff information. But the original premise was Yulia was feeling very called to go to the Watches and Clocks Museum of Geneva, and they were underground. And a lot happens underground in Geneva, if you're not aware. We have CERN going on, which is part of the issue that that helped to break time in the first place, and why grid workers like myself and many others feel the need to help heal time and do the grid work in the first place. So there's been all sorts of different connections. So I was excited to hear that. She'd asked me to be there. I said no problem. And then at the women's circle that we mentioned in the last podcast, one of the girls had turned up with some quartz in her pocket. I won't tell you the whole story, but there was a connection. There were 2 pieces of quartz at this women's circle. And somebody was like, well, of course, quartz is in watches. And I was like, oh my goodness, the quartz, Yulia is supposed to go work with the quartz in this museum. That's exciting. That felt like a missing piece of the puzzle for her. And that was really cool. And I was like, okay, quartz, this feels like the missing piece of the puzzle. If we're healing time, we need quartz. So I knew to pack for this trip to Clava Cairns, this big chunky quartz crystal that I had also had when I was working in Stonehenge. I took a big, beautiful amethyst. I had, what else did I have in my little toolkit? I had a rose that had been in that same women's ceremony. I had a candle from that night. I had some water with all of our intentions in it from that night as well. And I had a little bag of other natural bits and pieces from the girl running the circle as well. I had a flower of life with some organite, and because I'd also had a flower of life at Stonehenge, so I thought I'll bring my flower of life with me. And I had some Palo Santo, and that was what I had in my little toolkit. That was what I'd been guided to take with me. So I had that all packed up, and this little hint that maybe there was something to do with quartz. And for almost all of my spiritual work I've done over the last at least 6 years, I've worn a big chunk of clear quartz. Clear quartz is quite amazing. It stores information and memories. And so when I've been in a lot of my journeys, I don't always remember everything. I don't always, especially if you're journeying overnight or, doing some sort of plant medicine, you don't always remember everything. And so if I've got that on, I'll always trust that it remembers and it knows everything it needs to know. And so I always wear that when I'm doing these missions and ceremonies, and I wear it other times as well. But people often comment on it. It's powerful. People notice it. Even today I was wearing it. I took my mum out Christmas shopping. I know it's early, but she starts to panic, and we just went and got it done. So I was wearing it today, and the girl at the checkout was like, "Oh, that's a very special piece. Is it heavy?" And I was like, "Oh no, it's fine." But yeah, people notice it and they comment on it. So I had that with me as well, and we set off on our adventure. We had 2 nights booked, and this was a piece of the puzzle that I forgot to tell you in one of the last episodes as well. The accommodation I booked cost me £111, 78 pence or something. It was originally quite a bit more, but I had a discount because I booked through Genius on booking.com, and also I got another discount because I was booking on my mobile phone. I almost never book accommodation and flights and things on my phone, but I did this time. Anyway, these 2 random discounts that I wasn't expecting brought my bill for the 2 nights down to £111, and I was like, of course, because I'm going for the 11/11. How wonderful. And so that just felt even more guided. I was like, I am definitely supposed to be going this weekend. So we got up early, got in the car, and Bella was being so sweet. She could tell something was happening from the day before, because I packed all her stuff up to get ready, and she was just following me back and forwards. Every time I went and put stuff in the car, she's just looking at me, and I was like, "You're coming, don't worry, you're coming." And you could just tell she was getting a wee bit out of sorts. But anyway, she was very happy to be getting put in the car as well, and we headed off quite early, partly because we don't have a lot with daylight savings has changed, and we're obviously going into winter. I wanted to get most of my driving done in the daylight, especially because some of these roads up north can be quite windy, and I haven't driven them before. I don't even know. I've been up there before, but don't think I've driven that entire way myself, certainly not in one go on my own. So I wanted to get a bit of a head start. So we headed off, had one quick pee stop at the Green Welly shop, and then headed up to Glencoe. And Glencoe is a very special valley, glen, I suppose, Glencoe. And it's a very popular scenic spot for tourists in Scotland anyway. You get tour buses stopping and people taking the sights and the views because it is beautiful. There are very steep hills covered in heather and, sheer rock faces on both sides, and it's quite a dramatic landscape. It's really beautiful, and I have a connection with it because my mum's cousin had a family farm there for many years, and we used to come and visit as children. So I remember my trips up to Glencoe as children, and we used to get to ride, I've just remembered his name, Timmy the Donkey. I couldn't remember his name the other day, but it was Timmy the Donkey. And yes, we really enjoyed coming up to visit. And they were predominantly sheep farmers, and the Hugh, the older gentleman, my mum's cousin's husband, and their son Alan were both members of the Glencoe Mountain Rescue Team. So they would be the ones that would be dispatched if somebody was in trouble on the hills, rain, shine, snow, middle of winter. They would set out on foot and go and try and rescue people on the mountains. And they did that for a very long time. It also is a very sad place because the son, Alan, when he was about 29, I'm guessing, I think about 14 at the time, died on the road in Glencoe, actually on their own land. His wife was pregnant, and I think he'd been in town sharing with people that she was pregnant, or she was nearly due to give birth. There was something going on around that. And on his way home, somehow, I don't know if he did try, I don't know what happened, but it was a single car accident, and he flipped it over off the road into his own land and passed away. Very, very sad for the family. And he could have been dodging a stag. I just don't know what happened. Nobody knows. But very sad. Obviously, his child was born, I think, only weeks after he passed, which is obviously really tragic. And the reason I'm telling you this bit is because when we parked up, we went on a big walk, Bella and I. It was pouring rain, it was misty, and really Glencoe, that's how it is most of the time, and felt very authentic. So we went on a walk, and I was just thinking about them, thinking about the family, thinking about my childhood trips up there, Timmy the Donkey, and it actually jogged a memory of a sort of planetary gridwork piece of the puzzle that happened during Alan's funeral. So as his coffin was being lowered into the ground, his father, Hugh, who would have been in his probably 70s at the time, an older gentleman, and they'd had to move off the farm at that point because, Alan was no longer there to take it over and run it for them. So they'd had to sell the farm prematurely. They'd lost their son. It was really, obviously, a very sad situation. And the funeral happened in Edinburgh. I don't know how many hours, 4 hours drive away from Glencoe, 3, I don't know. And just as they were lowering the coffin into the ground, he put his hand in his pocket and pulled out earth from their farm called Achtriachton. And there's a loch called Loch Achtriachton in Glencoe, and he pulled out soil from that place and threw it onto the coffin. And my mum actually told me that story today again, even though I'd thought of it just a couple of days when I was there. And it just made me think that even though this older man who's been a sheep farmer all his life and would never maybe call himself spiritual, but he knew that his land, his soil had an energy and a resonance, and he'd taken a pocket full of soil and brought it to his only child's funeral in the big city. So it makes me emotional even just saying it now, but that really is kind of the essence of what we're doing with this grid work. Is we're taking bits of the pieces of the puzzle, something that holds an energy and a resonance, something that is loved or cared for, and we're taking it somewhere else where it needs to be. So I just found that really poignant, and it reminded me when I was walking on that land on Sunday in the driving rain, just thinking of them. And I'm in the valley, walking along a slightly muddy path up a slight incline, but marveling at these crazy mountains on either side, and just thinking of how selflessly they would go and try and help people. And that story came to mind. So I hope you don't mind me sharing that with you. But what I'm trying to say with that is that grid work can happen in in many different ways. It could be something as simple as taking some soil from somewhere that resonates with you and taking it to somewhere else. We sometimes overthink these things or think we have to be doing more than we really have to be. And that comes back to the voice note that I just listened to from Yulia. And she was saying that while her initial intention was to go to the watch and clock factory, she actually couldn't. She was totally wiped out, and she ended up staying at home and holding space and connecting with different people that were doing things and doing her own practice and meditation, but she didn't actually go anywhere. And that is totally fine as well. She said she had a little bit of an ego battle about it within herself. She's like, I should be going somewhere special, I should have this story. And that just wasn't how her day was supposed to pan out. But I feel like she guided me. She asked me to be at Clava Cairns, and she, with the intention that she felt she needed to have going to the Watches and Clock Museum, she helped me join some dots with the quartz, which I will tell you about later. So I knew that quartz was going to be key, just because of this feeling that we had to heal time. I hope this is making sense. So we got back to the car. We were both soaked. Bella was disgustingly wet and muddy, but we got dried off, got her back in the car, and I drove through Fort William, quick stop at Aldi for supplies, and then we headed up the Great Glen. The rain stopped, the sun came out, and it was the most magical drive just before Fort William, into Fort William, and up the Great Glen, which is a series of 3 lochs end to end, and you start it, and it cuts the whole centre of through the middle of Scotland. And the Great Glen is the one that also connects with the Appalachian Mountains, which is the episode we did with Christine Williams. She shared that it connects with the Appalachian Mountains, which is amazing. And you can see the crazy, some sort of volcanic situation has happened. It is, again, very dramatic, steep mountains on both sides, and the road travels up the side of the lochs in one after the other that are all connected with locks, as you would get on a canal to connect bodies of water. And so it is possible that you can kayak, or we did Canadian canoeing. We did the whole length of it when I was a kid doing my Duke of Edinburgh the other way. We did from Loch Ness to Fort William. So I'd done the route before, but I hadn't driven it, and it was absolutely stunning. I couldn't even tell you how beautiful it is. And because I was driving and I had a goal to try and get to Urquhart Castle before it closed for the day, well, the last people were due in at 3:30 because it's November, and this was my big goal, was to get to Urquhart Castle. It felt like I needed to be there, and we got there on time, and I was so pleased to make it and find it. And we got out the car, and the woman just looked at me and was like, no dogs. And I was like, oh, okay. And I just felt like Bella had been in the car too long. Yes, we'd had a nice long walk for an hour in the rain in Glencoe, but she'd been sitting in the car for a long time, and I just felt like I didn't want to leave her in the car while I go off exploring this ruin. And it's an outdoor ruined castle, so that is why I assumed that she would be allowed to go there. It didn't even occur to me that she would not be. It wasn't like an indoor medieval castle with furnishings or anything like that. It is a ruined, basically, pile of stones surrounded by grass. So I was a little surprised, a little bit disappointed, but that is because I thought that was part of my journey. And then I just have to very quickly go, not today, that's just not meant to be. I decided that all is happening in flow, and if I'm not supposed to go to the castle, while I could have put her in the car and I could have gone down, just didn't feel right. And, at the end of the day, I don't want my dog to be distressed or whatever on this wild mission I'm in. So instead, we just carried on, and I wanted to find a walk for her along the way, but it was actually very difficult to stop. I was kind of on the wrong side of the road for any of the stopping places, even though it was just so beautiful. But the good thing was I managed to get to Inverness before it got dark, and it was windy roads, and I was just happy to get to my accommodation, get checked in, and we just went on a lovely walk once we got there. So it wasn't much further up the road. So We just got cozy and got an early night, because the next day we got up and headed to Culloden battlefield. The battle was featured in Outlander. It's the big battle, if you probably remember it, if you've ever seen Outlander. If you haven't, it's the English versus the Scottish. And I think it was the final battle between the two, and Scotland lost, and that's why we're Britain. I think. My history is not great, but I think that's what happened. And there was a huge amount of bloodshed by lots of the clans of Scotland. It was a sad, bloody battle, to the point that the fields are marked and special, and there are headstones for each of the different clans for where they lost their lives or are buried, and it's got a big visitor centre, and it's a big deal. So I'd visited there as a child. We just parked up. I thought I was going to be visiting there. I thought that was part of the mission as well, but ironically, for somebody that was on a mission to heal time or help heal time or whatever, I was running a little late. And in the movie, or in Outlander, on the morning of Culloden, Jamie walks Claire back to Clava Cairns so she can go back through the stones in time to be safe, because they didn't think anyone was potentially going to survive this battle. It was a bloodbath, and he sent her back through the stones to keep her safe. And that morning they walked there, and I was like, "Ooh, okay." So I Google it, and I'm like, "Oh, it's a mile and a half." I was like, "Oh, that's not too bad. I'll walk from the battlefield to Clava Cairns, because that's what they did in Outlander." So we parked up, and I headed off. I thought I'd sort of be maybe walking across the battlefields and that way, but it turns out it's all fenced, and it's farmland, and it's just not a thing. I thought I'd be walking over moors and through forests and whatever. It was just not the way it was going to be. So, but I'd already I'd started the walk, and it was down sort of narrow, windy country lanes, and with a dog in tow and all the things. It was not ideal, but we did it. We were safe, and we made it. So if you ever do consider going to Clava Cairns, just drive. It's only a mile and a bit, but it is not the best, easiest walk. It's okay. You can do it. Maybe 7 cars past us, but it's still not great. So each way, maybe about 7 cars each way. It's not a huge amount, but I wish I'd driven. But anyway, we didn't. So it was all part of the process, part of Bella's morning walk. Everything was fine. We got to Clava Cairns just before 11, maybe 10 to 11, something like that. And there were only 2 cars in the car park. One was a little family from Brazil. They were really sweet. And another couple that looked a bit spiritual, and they just did a quick walkabout. And the family was there for a bit longer, running around. And I just said to them, "Hey, you're here. It's actually a really special day. Make a wish." The lady was quite curious, and she was asking a few questions, and they were also there because of Outlander. So it was a nice little connection. But from then, for the next, by the time I had a look around and figured out what I'm going to share next, there were very few other people there. They ran around for a while and then left, and for quite a good chunk of time I was totally on my own. Then there were a couple of other groups maybe turned up, maybe another 3 car lots, one very small group, but they just, by the time I was all settled, they just left me to my devices, and that was great. So if you're unfamiliar with Clava Cairns, I had never been before, but I'd obviously looked online and looked at the photos, and they are stone, predominantly 3 main stone cairns laid out in the shape of Orion's belt. So there are 2 that line up, and then there's a smaller one slightly skewed off to the side. And they're the big ones. They're layers and layers of stones in a circle built up, and then they have sort of satellite stones round the outside of them. which I will come back to later. And the middle one is slightly different. It is a whole circle. The other two have gaps that you can walk into and have a look around. The story is that they are ancient burial sites, but funnily enough, the top cairn lines up with the sun on certain days, and I'm just like, why would you need a burial site having the sun line up on the solstice kind of idea? It just didn't really. These things don't always add up to me. And there was this little fourth circle that was much, much smaller. It was really just a ring of stones, much smaller than the others, much less elaborate. And you would almost just walk past it. I nearly didn't even really look at it because I had like 10 minutes to get settled and I was trying to find my spot where I was going to be. And I'd sort of eyed up a tree stump behind one of the first cairns, and I thought, oh, that could do over there. And I really but I was trying to figure out where I needed to be for the meditation. And then I read the plaque next to this fourth cairn, and it was called the Kerb, K-E-R-B cairn, and I put a description of it on my Instagram stories, and it's saved in a highlight called Healing Time, if you want to have a look at that. And it showed that they had found inside this very basic looking ring of circles, so much smaller than everything else, they had found buried a ring of white quartz. And this white quartz, they were trying to say it was a tomb, another grave, which again, why would you need a ring of white quartz to bury somebody? It didn't really make sense to me. And it also noted that this white quartz had come from Kilmartin Glen, which is somewhere I went 3 years ago on another spiritual quest. I was actually invited there by a family friend who had a cottage up there, and out of the blue, she just invited me to go there. And I said, oh, that'd be lovely, thank you very much. And Bella and I spent about a week up there exploring around Kilmartin Glen, and it is, I had no idea. I just thought I was going for a nice relaxing little trip and staying in this cottage. And when I got there, I realised there are hundreds and hundreds of stone circles, cairns, graves, sacred hill called Dunad, where they would crown kings of the next king of Scotland, this kind of the place. Lots of cup and ring markings. And I felt like every time I turned around, there was another ancient sacred site of some sort. It was magical. And again, it's somewhere back in all of my stories on my Instagram. If you want to go and have a wee look at the adventures we did in Kilmartin Glen, it'll be under Scotland maybe, or home. But yeah, so really beautiful. So this white quartz had been dug up in Kilmartin Glen, which would be a good, in this day and age, 5 hours, 6 hours drive apart. And what like in those days, were they walking, were they on horseback? I don't know, but they knew to dig up the white quartz in Kilmartin Glen, walk, ride, I don't know how they got there, and to bring that specifically to Clava Cairns blows my mind. And then bury it in a very particular circle in this other cairn off to the side next to these other three. Like, I just, these things just blow my mind. I'm like, they knew so much more. They were so connected. I think we're so disconnected now. You know, we are scrolling on our phones. There's fluoride in the water, maybe not for much longer in the US. And I don't think they have it in Scotland. Anyway, I filter that shit out anyway, just in case. But we are so dumbed down in so many ways, programmed literally from childhood through school, whatever. We are so disconnected from our spiritual senses and our intuition. And I really am quite excited about the prospect of things like fluoride being out of the water, because what I'm about to read you is really all about this. It's about the awakening of humanity, and that is what that signifies to me. And it's a next step on that journey towards the awakening of humanity, which is all why we're here. It's why we're having this conversation. It's why I go on these journeys in my little attempt to help do whatever I'm guided to do, and with a bigger intention and mission to help raise the frequency and vibration on the planet, to help in general. With our ascension, with our journey. I got set up and I decided to sit right on the stone circle. Bella was so good. She was on I've got a long retractable lead, and I attached her to the fence that was just next to me, and she had a bit of a mooch around, but she came and actually lay down right in the centre on top of where the white quartz would have been, and just got comfy, and she just settled and lay there. So I was like, oh, great. Brilliant. And so I got all my little bits out, I got my quartz out, lit the candle, and I set all my little bits out. And I'd actually brought with me a blanket thing to sit on, and I wrapped it and I put it in a plastic bag so it wouldn't get wet. And I put that down on top as I sat in the cairn. So I wasn't going to get a cold bum, because I didn't know how long I was going to be there. I was like, this could be 10 minutes, this could be an hour, this could be longer. And so I was prepared to be there for a while. I had a coffee in my thermos, and we were ready to settle down. So what I did was first asked permission and settled in, and then opened the Akashic Records of Clava Cairns. And that is usually how I do my work, because I ask them to guide me, because I didn't know specifically where I should be or what I should be doing beyond this notion of healing time. And then finding the quartz was like, this is it. I also had a pendulum. I was able to check the energies. I was like, is this where I'm supposed to be? Yes. Is this what I'm supposed to do? Yes. I was like, right, we're in the exact right spot. This is what I'm supposed to be doing. So I felt very clear that that's what I was supposed to be doing. I'd also prepared earlier in the morning. And I always talk about this stuff. I bang on about it. You're probably sick of me telling you, but I take this little thing called a fix. So that I'd had that in the morning. Then I had my Celtic sea salt to balance the minerals. Mixed in my thermos was cacao, and it's full of essential nutrients, and specifically magnesium as well. I had my magnesium the night before. And when you're doing spiritual work, when you're running a lot of energy through yourself, it burns up your minerals and your electrolytes, and specifically magnesium. And so I had been preloading the night before. I'd had my Celtic salt, my cacao with me as well, because I want to do everything I can to protect myself, because in the past I've totally burnt out from doing this work. I've overdone it, and it's taken quite a toll on my health. And while I want to continue to do it, I'm like, right, I've got to take care of myself, preload the magnesium, get the electrolytes in, make sure I'm hydrated. I drank a whole thing of coconut water as well between the previous afternoon and the morning. So I was well hydrated. My electrolytes and minerals were topped up, so I knew I was good to go. I also had beautiful rose oil on my heart chakra, and I had put frankincense on my pineal gland, and I'd also inhaled loads of beautiful frankincense. So I felt very balanced, very ready to sit and do this. And so I opened the Akashic Records. I have a process. I do a little part in it that protects my energy as well. And I call in the elements. I open the Akashic Records, and you call in your masters, teachers, and loved ones of the highest light and order, and go through the little process. And then I just listen. And I decided this time I had a big journal with me, and I would do some automatic writing. So when I'm not thinking, I'm not sitting thinking the words, I just allow the words to come through, and I just write them straight down. So I'm actually going to read out to you what I wrote down, because I think it tells you pretty perfectly what the situation is, and then I'll explain a little bit about what we did afterwards and the experience of that. All right. So what came through when I was given permission to do it, and I just said, what's going on with this? And what they told me was, time is but a construct. You may feel alone here, but you are more connected through thought and prayer than ever before. The light within connects with the light without. You are here to connect light in your heart to other hearts, but also to this earthly realm. The light of your candle, the light of your quartz, the light from Stonehenge to here, Clava Cairns. You connect, you create, you allow healing and peace. I said, okay. I said, why time? And the first thing that came through, it's an ancient clock. And I was like, oh, interesting. Now, but it says, but the quartz is the bit that makes it work. Otherwise, the sun can't power it. Just like the clock Hannah sent you today. Now, Hannah Willow, the last person on the podcast, had sent me the photo of an open clock face with all the cogs in the morning, right? And it just, in my head, I was like, oh. And then they said, it's all the cogs. You are all the cogs in a giant machine. And I was like, of course. I wouldn't have known about the quartz. It wouldn't have occurred to me had these other women not been doing this work. We hadn't connected. Hannah was connecting through time. She'd had some things like a grandfather clock had stopped at a specific time. She'd been having all these things with time as well as Robert Edward Grant, Matthias De Stefano. These guys have been to Clava Cairns. They've talked about healing time as well. And so all of these pieces of the puzzle, not one individual of any of us could figure all this out on our own. We need all these different parts of the puzzle to come together. So literally says you are all cogs in a giant machine. And I also realized when they were telling me this, that if you looked down on Clava Cairns from above, and around the main stone cairns are these, I call them radial stones, I think, that they could be sort of set out like the hours on a clock. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. And some of the clocks, it looked like at the 12, the quarter past, the half past, the quarter to, there were sort of raised mounds of, it looks like grass now, leading out to those stones on the quarters around the clocks faces, around these cogs. And I was like, oh, that is so interesting. And so I was still figuring it out, but they were guiding me through this. So you are all cogs in a giant machine. The moment humanity realizes it only works when all the cogs are working together, and that we need the light from the sun stored in the quartz, only then will the truth of humanity be clear. Remove one part, it doesn't work. And I said, what can I do to help? Activate the power of the clock. The quartz is the power bank, one of many clocks of the world. This is one of the most ancient. Like chakras, the energy needs to spin. That's why you're here, to make them spin again. Start at the top. And then I numbered the stones 1, 2, and 3. So the top one was pink. They told me the colour. The middle one was green, and the third one was black, specifically obsidian. So the top one was pink, and that was to represent the pineal gland. The green was the heart, and the black is the root chakra. And obsidian is specifically a crystal that is linked to the root chakra. And it can really bring up a lot of stuff if you work with obsidian around your root chakra, around healing and ultimately feeling safe. So I then knew that I had to spin the energy like chakras. And I said, just checking, are we doing it clockwise? Yes, clockwise. I was like, okay, great. So I started within a meditative state within the records. I started imagining pink swooshing round these pink energy going round the top cairn in a clockwise manner. And it took quite a while to get it going, to release pieces and get it moving really cleanly and clearly. And once it was able to be spinning, I checked in. Yes, it was done. It was clear. I moved on to the heart chakra, and it took ages to get this green energy moving and flowing. And the pink was flowing into the green as well. So they were connecting like the cogs of the clock, how the the bits sort of, they clip into each other, and if one moves, the other moves, right? So the pink was helping the green move, but it was a lot stickier. And I had an awareness that I needed to push the levers that were on the quarter, on the 15 minutes every quarter, these bigger levers. So I was pushing them with my energy, my intention, my consciousness. Now, these are stone levers, and I was pushing them. And then I had this awareness that I needed help. I was like, I can't do this. And I knew that so many of you were tuning in, and some other beautiful ladies had said, I'll be there with you at 11 o'clock. And I called in the army of angels and helpers and people that were meditating at the time to help me push this green energy around. And with this help, it was like pushing on these huge levers to get this energy, to get the heart moving, to get the green energy flowing. And I couldn't have done that without the collective help. So thank you if you did tune into my meditation at 11 o'clock or sat in your own meditation at that time. Thank you very much, because I needed the help. I couldn't do it on my own. And of course, we are all these cogs in the wheel. We cannot do this work on our own. So I also had this awareness that the stone is the part that's left, and that potentially there was a big wooden structure on top that acted more of like a cog. The stone was almost like I suppose the permanent part of the mechanism. While they were energetic, I felt potentially there had been wooden mechanisms, kind of like the hands of a clock, there in the past. I have no proof or anything of that. It was just a notion that I had that maybe big wooden posts could have been in the center, and with they could have actually moved like an actual clock. So I don't know if that's true or not. That was just an awareness that I had. So the next part said, it's part of an ancient power grid we are bringing back to life. Hang on, we're nearly finished this bit. Imagine an army pushing with you, and that's when I brought in these other people. So the top one, this heart, the celestial, the heart, and then the root chakra. And I felt the obsidian one, the root chakra, had like a deep sort of shaft underneath it that went like really deep into the ground. Again, I have no proof if that is true or a thing. It just felt like that one ran really deep into the ground. And the words kept coming, it's safe to spin, it's safe to spin. And so when I was spinning this energy, the green and then the pink and the green flowing together, and then the pink and the green flowing into the black, and getting this black obsidian moving, and that was really sticky and hard to get that one flowing. It's all, that root stuff is so gunky to get moving anyway. So really took all this collective energy and getting these three bits spinning. And then it says, they're not tombs, they never were. Tombs don't need quartz. And then once all three of those were spinning, it said, for the part I was sitting in, this over the quartz, and it says, put a column of light into the Clava Cairns, into the quartz. So I imagined, if you've seen my posts about the Schumann resonance, you see often like just big white columns of light coming through, this 5D light energy. And that's what I sort of imagined coming through into the quartz and into this Clava Cairns, was a massive shaft of white light. And it was just absolutely pouring and flooding in. And actually the Schumann resonance was giving big amounts of white, beautiful light through at that time. So I felt like that lined up beautifully with what was coming through. Anyway, it was just being directed into this Clava Cairns. And it said, and so we charged that up, and then once I had a feeling that was complete, it said, once they're all working, and so it was like we were effectively recharging the battery. That's what we were doing. So this quartz was the battery of the clock, and we were recharging it. So it says, once working, it can connect to Stonehenge and the heart chakra, and then Geneva, the heart of time, and then to Egypt, to Orion. So Egypt, the Great Pyramid of Giza, is also in the shape of Orion, with two bigger pyramids lined up and then a smaller one slightly skewed off. So I knew that they were connected anyway. We've had so much. We spoke to Jamin about Egypt and how his connection. Robert Edward Grant's spoken about the Orion connection, and that was just really clear to me. So then it told me that the quartz prism is like a mirror and reflecting the light and the flower of life. And it said the energy is going down the spine of Albion, and it felt like two different sendings of light. It felt like we sent it to Stonehenge in one process almost, and then down the spine of Albion to Geneva in a second one. I'm not really sure, but it said, so it went through Roslyn, and it said Roslyn redirects the energy, and I had left a double-ended, huge, big chunky quartz there, maybe 2018 in Roslyn. So again, the quartz, I had been gifted that by a lovely girl. I can't even remember where she was from, somewhere in Europe. And she asked me if I would take this beautiful double-headed quartz I met her in Greece. And she asked me if I would take it to Roslyn. And I did. And I put it at Roslyn Chapel. So Roslyn was redirecting it through that crystal that I'd put there before. And then it said Geneva amplifies it. And then it goes through to Egypt and connects to the 3 pyramids. And then I asked, where is the Egypt quartz? Because if Clava Cairns has a quartz battery that you're recharging, I presume Egypt must have one. And I got the notion that maybe it was under the Sphinx. I don't know. I have no idea. I haven't researched it. But if you have any notion about there being quartz in Egypt, especially on the plateau, let me know. And then I had the Egypt oming from Jamin that you can access. If you go into the show notes under his interview, you can click on it and get it for free, except I did not have any phone reception there, and I hadn't saved it offline on my phone. And so I was like, oh, well, maybe that's not what I'm supposed to do. So I omed myself. I did some oming. And funnily enough, after that, my friend sent me this Clava Cairns oming track, and I was like, how bizarre. But anyway, I was oming in the cairn, and then I had a Third Eye binaural beat that I felt called to play as I wrapped this up and completed the journey. So, and it said the Third Eye flow frequencies, and Loch Ness, where I had driven the length of, represents the pineal gland as well, and the awakening of humanity through Loch Ness. And it said this is about the awakening of humanity. The beats will amplify over the grid. And then it said Fort George is part of the grid. So that afternoon, I thought I was supposed to go. I had Fort George kind of earmarked, but let me just see. So yeah, we finished up at there. It took about a solid hour to do that process and take the notes and get it all going. Bella had been so good. She just sat with her little head on my foot the whole time and lay like on that quartz, like I'd said. So she was so good, because she could sometimes be quite restless and not give me a chance to really settle. But this time she really just settled and let me do it. So I was very grateful for that. And everybody had just left me in the corner doing my own thing. Nobody had really come over. And I was so happy to have the space, and it had been so quiet anyway, but anybody that had been there just left me to it. And then, so we packed up everything. The only thing I left was a little bit of the water that had the sacred intention, and a few rose petals and leaves, and took everything else. We packed up, walked back up the windy, narrow roads, back up to Culloden. But I knew I wasn't supposed to spend time there. I thought maybe before the trip, but I knew that day I was like, no, I need to get out of here as quickly as possible. So I went to the bathroom, and I'm only telling you that because somebody messaged me and was like on Instagram and said, how do you go to the bathroom when you're on these spiritual quests? This was like, she was quite concerned for me. She lives in London, and she was quite concerned about where I had gone to the bathroom. And I messaged her back and I said, well, I was eyeing up a few trees because I did need to go. I did hold it in, and I went when I got back to the visitor centre. And she was just having a bit of a laugh. And then the second day, I'd gone for what we call wild wee, and I had gone in the forest, and I messaged her back and I said I had to go for a wild wee today. And she was like, "Oh, you're so brave," and I was like, "Really not." But anyway, I just thought that was quite funny that was her big concern for me, was where I had gone to the bathroom. But there are lots of different places you can go. It's fine. I didn't have to do any wild weeing on that first day. But we had a packed lunch in the car and then headed straight to Fort George. Now, I also thought I might have time to go to Findhorn, but there was just absolutely no time. And it was so clear that I had to go to Fort George and not Findhorn or anywhere else that afternoon. It was like, do not stop, go, do not collect 200, just get yourself to Fort George. So that's exactly what we did. It took me about, 25 minutes or something to get there. And Fort George is a current active military base, and it is an ancient star fort in the shape of a dragon. And they will tell you it was built in, the 1700s as a fortification to protect Inverness. Inverness also has an ancient star fort right in the centre of it. But they don't tell you these things are ancient. And these forts, star forts, dragon forts, this fort from above is in the shape of a dragon, is part of the ancient energy grid, the ancient power grid. And they were very special. And if you have never seen these before, I highly recommend you Google ancient star fort images specifically, because they are so beautiful, so precise. The geometry is stunning. They look like mandalas or snowflakes or something. And this one in particular is the shape of a dragon. And the dragon, obviously, in the mythology is very important. It's the year of the dragon this year. And it was very clear that I had to go there straight after as part of this process to, I wasn't really sure what. And but I was also quite spent. So we didn't do too much in Fort George, but sometimes just the energy of you being somewhere is enough. And I took Bella. She did not like the drawbridge. So she had to be carried over the drawbridge because there were cracks in between the wooden walkway, and she did not like that she could see the ground below. So my little princess was carried over the drawbridge. And Fort George, even though it's an active military base, you are allowed dogs. You're not allowed them inside, but you are allowed them outside to walk around and go in the grass. And I just tied her up outside if I needed to go in anywhere. And she just patiently waited like the best girl she is. And so we had a good walk around Fort George, and it was starting to get towards sunset. I used the public bathroom, no problem there. And just because it's so funny, this is like what people are intrigued by. But anyway, I had another bathroom stop, all was well. And there's a church there. I went into the church, and I know my friend Joyce had been there. I think it was just there in the summer, and I'd done quite a lot of energy clearing there because it had been really heavy energy. And I was also there on the 11/11 in the UK, and I don't know if it is around the world. I think in France there's a day of remembrance for all the soldiers that were lost, the veterans in World War I and II. And I'd had this awareness a few days before. I was thinking about the fact that we all stop and we honour our servicemen at 11 o'clock on the 11th of the 11th. Sometimes it's the 10th because it's Sunday and it's easier to arrange, but for most of the UK, it's 11 o'clock, minute silence on 11/11. And that is when I was doing my work and healing time. And while I'm all about honouring and remembering our servicemen, I did wonder, why are we doing it at that specific time on that specific day? Because it is such a powerful manifesting portal. And I did wonder if there were some darker elements to it, that we as a nation stand still and think about death and dying and bloody battles and war for a minute at one of the most potent moments for manifesting in the whole year. Interesting, huh? So that had an awareness. And so I was there in this church on a military base that was decked out on all the poppies on the 11/11, probably 1 o'clock, something like that. 12, yeah, probably not far off 1, maybe 1:30. So it was just quite interesting that that's where I'd ended up at that moment, and I spent a bit of time in there tuning into the energies and whatever in there. So that was an interesting place for me to be that day. Anyway, we continued on, didn't spend huge amounts of time there. It was beautiful. The weather was stunning. It wasn't even that cold. And it's just, again, I've showed it on Instagram stories. It was really a beautiful place to visit. And but we got out of there, and there's a beach there. And Bella had been such a good girl that I just let her go and have a good run on the beach, and picked up a whole bunch of white quartz on the beach. So I had pockets full of white quartz leaving there, because it's obviously they build these star forts and dragon forts specifically on very activated energy land anyway. And I think they are incredibly ancient, way long before whenever they told us they built them anyway. So I've got some beautiful activated quartz from that beach, and that was it for the day. We headed back to the hotel, and I got a pizza on the way. I was so hungry by that point. I'd hardly eaten anything all day, and I was just like, I need something to fill me up. So, and quite often I find that after, if I've hosted for a whole day, whether it's an event or when I did my 3-day live events, I hardly would eat anything at all for the 3 days. And then on the last night, I would eat for Britain. I would eat so much. It was like I'd given and emptied myself, and then I needed to like fill myself back up again. So you're probably shaking your head and saying, oh, you're not managing your energy right or whatever. Anyway, but that's just, I tend to get very hungry after these sessions. And I had a really good pizza. So that's fine. And then continue to rehydrate. And then the next morning we packed up, and I felt like, again, I wanted to be on the road early because I wanted to get the whole drive home done before it got dark. So we're up relatively early. And I have to say, the beds in this hotel were so good. I actually messaged them. I was like lifting up the covers on the side to find out what the mattress was. And it was like a sleep soul, it said. And I was like, oh, that's amazing. So I'm going to try and get the same mattress because it was so good. Anyway, so we'd had really good sleep and then packed up. And I felt like I'd been a bit slow off the mark. I was like messing around, and I was like, had a long shower, and I was just taking my sweet time, and I was like a bit annoyed at myself. I was like, come on, like this can be a little bit relaxing as well. It doesn't all have to be about the mission kind of thing, because my big stop on the way home was Loch Moy, Moy, and it is the centre of the Scottish Pentagram. So all of this work and all the people I know, we go to all these different points on the outskirts of this pentagram. And Loch Moy, specifically the obelisk in the centre on the island in the centre of the loch, is the geographical centre of this pentagram, where all of these energies from all these sacred sites are concentrated. They meet in the middle. And my mission was to walk round that loch, and I'd looked on all trails, and it looked like it was about 7 or 8 kilometers. It was going to take me about 2.5 hours, and I thought, I'm just going to do it. That can be Bella's morning walk. She'll be knackered in the car, and then we'll drive home. So there's also a war memorial there, or a memorial to the clan Macintosh, who had been lost, or I suppose in the Battle of Culloden or whatever. And I thought, I'll go there, and then I'll go on the loch, and then we'll walk around. Easy, no bother. So not easy. Anyway, I put in Loch Moy into the GPS, and it took me to some weird forest trail, and it was blocked off and saying no cars beyond this point. We started walking, and I was looking at the GPS, and I thought, we are not going towards the loch. This is taking me away off somewhere else. So we turned around, got back in the car, and I thought, I'll just drive along and see where I end up. And I saw a sign for the Macintosh Memorial. I thought, brilliant, parked up, headed up towards this memorial. And now this is where the story gets a bit wild. So I walked up with Bella and there was a lady standing there. And she said, morning, it's morning, beautiful day. Yes, it's lovely. And she said, why, are you local? I said, no, I'm not from here. And she said, why are you here? And I said, well, I'm on a spiritual mission. I said, so am I. And I said, brilliant. And she was quite emotional, and she started telling me this story. And she's an older lady, I guess in her 70s. And she's like, I have to tell you, I'm here because my he was basically her twin flame in this lifetime, and he has passed, and it was his birthday on the 12th of the 11th, and she was from Glastonbury, of course, and she'd come up to Loch Moy specifically to be there on the 12/11 for his birthday to honour and remember him. And why was she there? Because he wasn't a Macintosh in this lifetime, but they were in a past life together. So she said, do you believe in past lives? And I said, yes, of course. And so she whips out a couple of photos and shows me a photo of her and him in this lifetime, and then an older photo of the 27th clan chief Macintosh. And he is an absolute dead ringer. And I was like, well, that's interesting. And she said, well, we were married in that previous lifetime. I was Lady Macintosh in another lifetime, and this was our land. I said, oh, wow, that's amazing. This was in the 1800s sometime. I said, that's amazing. So she said, I remember this land, and he recognized me in this lifetime. And we connected, and we'd realized, and he was originally from Edinburgh, this guy, but he had been pulled up to this area, this part of the world, and then he had this realization of who he was and where he'd come from in his past life. But he'd spent a lot of time in the area because he felt naturally at home there. So sometimes when you're called to different parts of the world, it's because you had a past life there or a connection or something like that. So she shared the story, and I was quite amazed, and she was very open, and she said that in that past life she hadn't been able to give him a son, and so the marriage hadn't lasted, and then in this lifetime she also couldn't give him a son, and she was very upset, and she was really lovely to speak to. And she said, well, are you going past Aviemore today? And I said, yeah, I'm headed past. I'm not going into it. I wasn't planning to, but I'm heading past that way to go home. And she said, well, I couldn't get a lift, could I? I said, yeah, sure, no problem. So she said she'd come up on the train, and she'd got the school bus somehow from Inverness down to Moy, because there's no village. Well, there is a village, but there's no shops, there's no buses, there's no taxis. And so she'd just come here on a whim, really, on the spiritual mission, but she had no plan on how to get out of there again. So she was quite lucky that I had showed up, and I was like, well, I think we were supposed to meet today, and I think I'm supposed to help you and take you back to Aviemore so she could make her way home from there, because it's more of a hub. So I was happy to do that. And she said, well, let me take you to the estate and show you the loch. And I said, oh, that would be wonderful. I said, because I'm really struggling to get to it. It seems everywhere is blocked off. And she said, oh, it is. The roads are all closed. It's been fenced off. Everything's shut. But I can show you because I used to live here and I know the way. And I said, well, that would be wonderful. Thank you. So she decided to be my guide. And honestly, had she not been there and offered to guide me, I don't think I would have been able to get to Loch Moy, because it just felt so hard. I was like, how many roads do I need to try and go down to get to the water's edge? Because it's not, I don't think they want us there. And even this island in the middle with the obelisk, you need a permit to go to it. So they are not making it an easy place to access. Whoever the powers that be are, they really don't want you going. So as we were about, I said, do you feel complete, having had your time at this memorial? She said, yes. I said, well, I'm happy to head to the loch whenever that's really where my destination is. I only came to this place in case I could then get to the loch. So she said, oh, are you not picking up some fool's gold first? And I said, what? And she showed me the rock, and it had these beautiful gold glints in it. And she's like, oh, it's really highly powerful stone. And I said, oh, great. Okay. So I picked up a whole bunch of fool's gold. So I don't know what's in the rock, in the crystal. It's sort of some sort of crystalline. I don't know if it's quartz. I don't know, but I picked it up and I put it in my pocket. And she said, why are you here? And I explained about the date, how it was the 11/11 yesterday and the 11/12. And she was like, oh, you'll find me fascinating then. I said, oh, I'm sure. Great. Tell me the story. I said, well, I've got my Egyptian ring on and I've come from Glastonbury. And she also used to live in Arran, which is where we have a holiday home as well. So I thought that was an interesting connection. And she said, well, and you'll think this is crazy. I was like, try me. At this point, I am well open to crazy stories. And she said, well, a couple of interesting ones. She said, I had to go to Jerusalem on the 10-10-10. And I was like, oh, tell me more about that. And she said, well, it was the 10th of the 10th, 2008. And the 2 and the 8 joined to be 10. And, well, she said, time stopped. A portal opened up. And I swear I met Jesus. And I was like, okay. And she said, but he didn't really say anything. It was more of just a transmission of energy and wisdom. And I was like, oh, interesting. So, well, Yeshua, but Jesus. And it was over Yom Kippur. And so it was a very busy, potent time in Jerusalem anyway. And somehow, I think it was on some steps or something, she said time opened up and she met Jesus. Anyway, that was interesting. Also, the date was interesting. She'd been to Egypt. She'd been to the pyramids. She'd worked with Horus and Isis. And she was going, the pyramids are power plants, right? They're not what they say they are. And I said, yes, I'm aware of that. And she said that she had felt her mission was to go to these places before 2012 because she said everything shifted. So her missions were all pre-2012. And I do feel like people were on missions at different times. And the baton gets handed over at different points to different teams of people doing this work. She also said, I said, oh, that's interesting. I connected the energy to the pyramids yesterday when I was in Clava Cairns and also to Stonehenge. And she said, oh, when I was in Stonehenge, she said in a past life, she had been part of a group of the Knights Templar, and they had been trying to open a stargate at Stonehenge and had failed. Their attempt had failed. This is about 1,500 years ago. And she said she had to go back to Stonehenge on the same day of the stars' alignment and open a stargate. And she said she went into the middle of Stonehenge, which you're not supposed to do because there's things up. And she said, I've always been a bit of a rebel. I just went in the middle. And I went, all right. And she said a piece of black quartz appeared in the middle of the circle. And she activated it and was aware of this black quartz in the center. And she said she lost time and opened a stargate in the center of Stonehenge. And I was like, oh, that's so interesting. Quartz, you say? How fascinating. So I was trying to get her to tell me what day it was, but she wouldn't share the exact date that she did that. But she said that when she came out, her friend, or she'd lost this amount of time, I can't remember how much. And when she came out of it, she said she told her friend, but there is no, at the moment, there technically is no black quartz in the center of Stonehenge. It's just a circle. But she's like, she was back in time, through time or something, and there was black quartz in the center of Stonehenge, which I thought was interesting. All right, this is a quick interruption to the podcast that I recorded yesterday because I have some new information. So this is Joanna from the future, wanting to give you a quick update before I put that information out, if it was even remotely not true, but here's an update. So we were just talking about Stonehenge, and the lady had been in the middle with what she thought was a black quartz stone, not in her, I don't know, back in time or whatever. And then a reel popped up for me when I was on my way to bed doing a little scroll. I know, terrible, and it said that they've recently found out that Stonehenge's altar stone, one in the middle of Stonehenge, was brought all the way from Scotland, which is wild. And that would make the journey of this central altar stone, which is probably weighs tons, 750 to 1,000 kilometers. It could actually be from as far north as Orkneys or Shetland, which are the islands off the north east part of Scotland. So a long, long way for this central stone to travel to Stonehenge. Now, the other interesting part about this is that the stone is sandstone. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. And then, wait a second, isn't one of the main components of sandstone, you guessed it, quartz? And yes, it is. And then it got me thinking, is the altar stone the battery in Stonehenge? Potentially. And then I actually typed it into Google to just check that source from the reels and to see what else came up. And I actually mistyped it and I said the serial stone instead of the central stone, the altar stone. And it came back as saying that there was an actual stone called the serial stone randomly, which was a blue stone known for its resemblance and colour, and it weighs about 4 tons. So there is a blue stone that's there, and that could have been closer to the black one the lady was imagining. I don't know, but that one was from Wales. But I don't know. So I just thought that was fascinating. And then I'm still thinking about the connection to Egypt. I don't know if we've talked about that yet in the podcast. I think so. And I was like, well, where is the quartz in Egypt then? Right? Of course, because if the quartz is coming up in all these different places. And it was so interesting that quartz is one of the major sources of economic contributions to Egypt because they have so much quartz there. And I just thought that was absolutely fascinating that maybe they put a major part of the Earth Grid's power plant, built them on top of what could be massive amounts of quartz in Egypt. So I thought that was really interesting. I don't know if it's specifically on the plateau or not. I'm just not sure about that, but it's just very interesting. And the Egyptian quartz is apparently 99.9% pure, which makes it obviously very potent, very active, and it would be able to run an electric charge. Because I remember finding out about sandstone having the quartz in it. That's a random fact to know, isn't it? Because a lot of the buildings in Glasgow, where I'm from, are red sandstone. They're very beautiful buildings. But the part of the theory of that is that when we used to have the domes and things on the top of buildings and cathedrals, they were copper domes with the antennas on top, that the sandstone would actually conduct electricity in the building through the quartz. It is built of mainly a white sandstone, which just means it's got different components in it, but would have the same properties. And I do believe that the average red brick that did a lot of the building work around the world has the same properties as well. So just an interesting little facet to add in about the quartz. I feel like I couldn't put the interview up or the podcast up without mentioning that what I found out about that central stone and also the amount of quartz that's in Egypt. Just interesting little snippet. All right, back to the rest of the podcast. Thanks. Anyway, so she's telling me all this as we walk towards this big estate, which I didn't know existed. And we walk past the gatehouse and there's loads of angry dogs barking and a road closed signs up. And she's like, oh, we'll just go through. So we just walk straight past the road closed signs. And I'm pretty sure if I had got to that point, I would have stopped and not gone any further if there was road closed signs. But off we go, bold as brass. And we walk down a sort of forestry trail and come to the end of Loch Moy. And she said, off you go, and I know that you have some things to do. I'll just wait here for you, and then we'll go to the main house. I said, yeah, no problem. So I went through the woods to the end of Loch Moy, and it was so beautiful. It was so still, so calm. This is the middle of November. There was a heat coming from the sun. Bella was just just upset. She was in the loch, splashing about, having a great time. And I just did a little process, and I set my intentions, and I sort of did my thing. And I popped the last of the water, the sacred water that I'd brought, into Loch Moy. And I had some other little bits and pieces, and we just did a little process there on my own, and went back to meet her. And we walked round to this big traditional house of the clan Macintosh. And there were two men working in the garden, and I was like, really, oh God, we shouldn't be here. This is like, we've walked straight past the road closed signs. And we got chatting to the two men, and she said, oh, who is the current chieftain of the clan? And one man said, oh, he's my boss. I'm just working here. And so the clan chieftain comes over, and he's John Macintosh of Macintosh, or something like this. Is his official name, and he owns the land and the big house and all this kind of stuff. And he's dressed, he looks like a clan chief. Well, I was in my green and my tweed as well, but anyway, he was in his tweed. And anyway, we had a bit of a chat with him, and she's like, do you believe in past lives? And he was like, not as open and convinced as I was. Anyway, she had her photos out and showing him, and I got a picture of the photos as well, so I can put them up. She was happy to share them with me. So I have photos of this guy, and I'll put them up on my Instagram as well. So anyway, all that came, and he showed me further round to this great big coat of arms and the original plot where the original castle had stood, and it was burnt down in a fire, like so many of these ancient places. And then we made our way back, and we had another stop at that beautiful loch, at the water and everything. It was just so magical. And then headed back up to the car, and then I drove her back to Aviemore, and we had a great chat on the way back. And she used to be a lawyer. She then was diagnosed with terminal cancer back in 1992. And she healed herself from that. She's obviously been thriving for the last 30 years. And she studied, alternative health. I was going to call complementary health, and does acupuncture and Reiki and herbalism and nutrition, all the stuff. So she and then she was like, oh, what do you do? And I was like, well, I used to be an accountant, and now I do I study all this stuff and as well. So it was really a lovely crossover and moment, and I was able to drop her off in Aviemore back in a more populated area, because we hadn't even seen another soul. I don't know who. She was probably going to like convince the clan chieftain to take her to Aviemore. I don't know how she was going to figure it out, but anyway, she got back, and well on her way back to Glastonbury. So that was just so specific and so random. Not random, but like magical. I was like, I literally needed a guide to get me to the loch. We would not have made it otherwise, because we were just wasting time. Like, we'd have already tried 2 different paths to get there. If I'd gone to the third, it would have been road closed. And I was just like, of course I need a guide to like take me down there. I don't know, maybe she was like not even real, but she was lovely for the couple of hours we spent together. And yeah, it was just really, really interesting. And there were all these, and the other thing I forgot was at Fort George, I had this feeling she needed to finish her work by 2012. And when I was a child, I don't know, 13, 14, I had this wild weekend of visions, energies, entities, all the things visiting. But one of the things that was really clear was they were telling me, and I was feeling like I was tunneling under the earth, but I was in a real hurry on a mission. And they told me that I had to complete it by the time the clock struck 12. And I felt like this urgency, this speed, this racing all over the place, was to save the world somehow. And I mean, I didn't know what the heck was going on. I mean, my mum thought I was losing my mind. I don't know, probably 20 entities in my bathroom. that were just all, I could just see them in my, I'm sitting on the edge of my bed with all these entities. And I remember just talking them into the light and helping them leave. And it was the weirdest. I was running up and down the corridors, those screaming at one point. I mean, it was weird. And my mum took me to the doctor and was like, there's something wrong with my child. She's lost it. And the doctor just said, are you okay? And I said, yes, I'm fine. I've just had a weird weekend. And that was it. But anyway, this piece of I remembered during this time about this piece of about time and this 12 o'clock and having to be finished by 12. And that lady said that she had to be finished her work by 2012. And anyway, we're in Fort George. And I'd taken the guy said, do you want this audio guide thing as you walk around with the map and you key in the numbers and stuff? I said, yeah, sure, I'll take it. And I tried and it didn't really work. And I was like, oh, this is rubbish. And we just did our own thing, went to the chapel and everything. And we were walking back through the main part of it. And I thought, oh gosh, I should really try and listen to something from this audio. And I just hit whatever number I was standing at. And it said, turn around and look at the clock above your head. And so the only thing I hear from this audio guide thing is turn around and look at the clock. So I turned around and looked at the clock, and lo and behold, the clock's hands were stuck at 12. It wasn't working, but the clocks were at 12. And I was like, oh my goodness, have I finished this mission before 12 o'clock? And here is this clock with the hands stuck at 12. So that was really weird. And as we were leaving Fort George, this is the day before, I saw the word Kronos written on the side of a, oh God, what are they called? Container, like a metal container, in huge, unmissable letters was the word Kronos. And I was like, oh my goodness. And I immediately was like, Kronos was the god of time. So I looked up the god of time and I was looking into that. And I was like, wow, like, I can't believe the words Kronos were literally there at the end. When I've looked at the clock, the audio thing told me to look at the time and all this kind of stuff. So it was just so weird and kind of synchronistic. And I was like, okay, right. The god of time has like just told me we're done, we're good. And then Julia said there was a water dragon or something was like right next to the word Kronos, because I sent her the picture and I was like, wow, I had not even noticed. So anyway, we were in good hands, in good company with the god of time. I hadn't even thought to invoke Kronos in my adventures. But anyway, we dropped the lady off, headed down and stopped at a beautiful place called the House of Brewer, which is a very swanky road stop off the A9 in the middle of Scotland, and highly recommend it. It's so nice. It's got a big food hall, it's got big clothing sections, it was like almost like a garden centre plus Christmassy market display thing. It was so lovely and bougie, and we had a wander around in there, and I bought some gifts and a nice coffee, and then there's a lovely walk you can do up to the Falls of Brewer. So it's just kind of out the back and round, and we walk away up through a forest, along a river, up to some waterfalls, and it was just a really nice walk for Bella. Just stretch her legs again, and she did a little paddle in the river. So that was like the last little gasp, and then we headed back down the road and got home just before it got dark. Anyway, I think that's it. This is so long. So I was I'll just do a little quick episode, fill you in. It is so long, and I also, like, there's so many other little pieces of the puzzle that came into play. Like my friend Hannah, that was just on the last podcast, had sent me something from her notes when she was in Clava Cairns, but I didn't see it until after I'd finished my section, and her work really beautifully tied in with what I'd done. And yeah, there's just so many pieces of confirmation and beautiful bits. And I'm wondering, I might try and record a meditation that does that activation with the colors and the moving energy. I'm not sure. We'll see. I'll check in and see if that feels like the right thing to do. But yeah, I appreciate all your support, everybody that was part of this. And if you have any feedback or like comment or like what you did, I would love, love, love to hear it. Like I said, this whole thing doesn't work. We're all just cogs in this big old wheel trying to figure it out and trying to follow these clues and meeting random ladies at memorials and things like that. It's just so mad. So anyway, I don't know. She's got my number. She was going to send me some stuff. I don't know if I'll ever hear from her again. But anyway, it was lovely to be able to help her on her journey and get her closer to getting home and listen to her story. She just wanted to tell, you know, when you just want to talk about your love and tell people about them and listen to her story. And it was just, I'm glad I was there to be able to sort of help her with that. So anyway, as always, I really appreciate it. If any likes, shares, reviews, ideally 5 stars on Spotify. And yeah, let me know. What you reckon? Who knows? Anyway, it's all good. Take care until the next time. Hopefully we'll have another interview for you soon. And hopefully, I don't know, hopefully time is sorted. Let's see. Anyway, take care.